Hello and welcome to Book Solve. We're at book 14 in my series of 100 Great Reads, and this one is one of the most yellowed books in my library, an old Penguin Modern Classics paperback edition published in the UK in 1970 of Jorge Luis Borges' stories and essays, brought together under the title of Labyrinths. And Labyrinths was one of the books that fascinated me in my early days of reading adult fiction. As an inexperienced reader, I was captivated by the more accessible stories, such as The Library of Babel or Funes the Memorious, where the fantastic was realised in short story form, like the bewildering paintings of Escher or Magritte's surrealism. Other stories were okay beyond my knowledge, and they were baffling pieces centered on seemingly esoteric puzzles with obscure allusions, but that just made it more interesting. Okay, I need to know more about this writer and read more of his stuff. And in some ways, Labyrinths was the introduction to the kind of writing that would attract and fascinate me for the rest of my reading life. Writing by someone erudite, confident and skilled in their craft, who didn't have an interest in merely telling a story in a straightforward way for entertainment that any reader could pick up and enjoy, but someone who was evidently driven to write by some strange muse to almost the possible task of creating text, not someone who wrote purely for commercial gain because, this will sell well and people will love reading it. Borges, although politically unlike me, is very much a right-winger who believed in the individual was more important than society, which is a viewpoint that's quite contrary to my own, was clearly someone that I would have loved and to have aspired to, but I was never gifted, determined, or hard-working enough to become. He's an intellectual. And I fell between two stools. I was far too lazy and disinterested in craft and labour to work with my hands. Too precious for grime, sweat, swearing, spitting, boasting, drinking and fighting, all that horrible macho stuff, and too unremarkable to excel at the serious study of science, the humanities, or the arts. And intellectuals what I craved to be, but wasn't. And you might say that literary writers such as Borges and Kafka and Dostoevsky were my spiritual icons, that the lonely, isolated and troubled writer locked away from society in his garret was a figure that I could relate to and understand. I'm straying away from the book here rather, but those three writers do hold a special place in my reading life. Back to Labyrinths. And perhaps the best way forward is for me to pick out and try to explain a few of the pieces in the collection, starting with Pierre Menard, the author of the Quixote. In summary, the narrator, who's a fictional literary critic, writes an admiring account of a French writer, Pierre Menard, who undertook an extraordinary literary project, which was to recreate Cervantes' Don Quixote, word for word, but independently and without copying it. And crucially, Menard does not want to transcribe Don Quixote, but to write it himself in the 20th century through his own experiences, intellect and worldview, so that the exact same words arise naturally from his modern consciousness. And incredibly, the narrator reports, Menard um, succeeded in writing certain chapters identical to Cervantes, and yet Menard's Quixote is seen as more subtle, more profound, because it was written centuries later in a completely different cultural context. Uh, Death of the author, eh? Well, this fantastical conceit is typical of Borges, who has a fascination with authorship, with authenticity, and the absurd, the impossible. He uses ideas that someone could he uses the idea rather that someone who could recreate a famous work identically and yet have it mean something entirely new to explore textuality, I guess, and there's also a dry irony to it. And the narrator's analysis is pompous, self-satisfied, by which means Borges is satirising literary critics, including himself. Um, in one of the more accessible, or one of the other more accessible pieces, The House of Asterion, Borges shows himself capable of delivering a puzzling monologue that hides a secret key to its understanding. The narrator, Asterion, describes his life in an enormous, intricate house, a place with infinite corridors, galleries, and no locked doors. He's completely alone, except for the occasional visits from 9 men every 9 years, who he claims he frees from evil by relieving them of life. And he seems resigned to loneliness, but also believes that one day his Redeemer will come. And yeah, he does arrive indeed. Probably the most difficult piece in Labyrinths is Tlon Ukbar Orbius Tertius, which much of the depth is in the story is hidden in Borges' intertextual references, and you can read the story and miss an awful lot of what's going on unless you are familiar with Western philosophy from the 17th century to the 20th century. The story begins like an essay describing a seemingly real conversation between Borges and a friend, and it names real books and authors, interweaves actual historical references with invented ones, something Borges does a lot, and presents everything in a scholarly tone, deliberately confusing the line between reality and invention. And the plot, such as it is, concerns a mysterious encyclopedia entry for Ukbar, which leads to the discovery of Tlon, a fully imagined world created by a secret society. Borges' stories spool and unspool, and in this and other collections, you come across repeating motifs: mirrors, doubles, tigers, knives, books, coins, masks, and as though the whole world is a collection of symbolical objects that hold arcane and esoteric meaning. Uh, in this, Borges' universe may echo a perceptual style sometimes found in autism, where objects are imbued with as much meaning and resonance as human interactions. When I first read Borges, I realised that this was what I wanted from books, not a nice story told with heroes and villains and exciting action and a satisfying conclusion. I wanted stories, texts that challenged the way I perceived the world, or told me something new, inventive works that excited and took risks, that required some work on the part of the reader, that had something to reveal, that had a purpose, that offered up part of the author themselves. I wanted to read books that were revelatory, each book to be a revelation. I wanted to feel different after I'd read a book. I'll finish off with an extract. Um, Borges had a great love of detective fiction, and I'm going to read the opening when I can find it of Death and the Compass. So we'll have a quick look through here, see if we can. It's there somewhere. It's towards the back, I think. Of course, I can't find it quickly because I need to find it quickly. Never mind. Bear with me. There it is. Right. I shall need my glasses on for this. The print in these old penguins is not large. One of the many problems which exercise the reckless discernment of Lonero, none was so strange, so rigorously strange, shall we say, as the periodic series of bloody events which culminated at the villa of Triste Leroy amid the ceaseless aroma of the eucalypti. It is true that Eric Lonero failed to prevent the last murder, but that he foresaw it is indisputable. Neither did he guess the identity of Yarmolinsky's luckless assassin, but he did succeed in divining the secret morphology behind the fiendish series, as well as the participation of Red Scarlac, whose other nickname is Scarlac the Dandy. That criminal, as countless others, had sworn on his honour to kill Lonero, but the latter could never be intimidated. Lonero believed himself a pure reasoner, an Auguste Dupin, but there was something of the adventurer in him, and even a little of the gambler. The first murder occurred in the Hotel du Nord, that tall prism which dominates the estuary whose waters are the colour of the desert. To that tower, which quite glaringly unites the hateful whiteness of a hospital, the numbered divisibility of a jail, and the general appearance of a bordello, there came, on the 3rd day of December, the delegate from Podolsk to the 3rd Talmudic Congress, Dr. Marcel Yarmolinsky, a grey, bearded man with grey eyes. We shall never know whether the Hotel du Nord pleased him. He accepted it with an ancient resignation which had allowed him to endure 3 years of war in the Carpathians and 3,000 years of oppression and pogroms. He was given a room on floor R, across from the suite which was occupied, not without splendour, by the Tetrarch of Galilee. Yarmolinsky supped, postponed until the following day an inspection of the unknown city, arranged in a placard his many books and few personal possessions, and before midnight extinguished his light. Thus declared the Tetrarch's chauffeur, who slept in the adjoining room. On the 4th, at 11:03 a.m., the editor of the Dishki Zeitung put in a call to him. Dr. Yarmolinsky did not answer. He was found in his room, his face already a little dark, nearly nude between a large anachronistic cape. He was lying not far from the door which opened onto the hall. A deep knife wound had split his breast. A few hours later, in the same room amid journalists, photographers and policemen, Inspector Treviranus and Lonero were calmly discussing the problem. And I think that's really a nice the nice little section showing Borges' wonderful writing, which really draws you in, wonderfully descriptive and inventive. So that's Jorge Luis Borges and Labyrinths, and it's only left for me to say cheerio from Booksolve, and we'll see you next time. Cheerio.